What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Start With Today podcast. My name is Jeff Schaefer, and I'm so excited that you decided to tune in today. For those of you who don't know, Start With Today was founded upon the idea that we can't go back and change our past. We can't look forward into the future and predict exactly what's to come and know every single step that we'll face along the way. But what we can do is take each day as a gift, enjoy the people God's placed in our lives, enjoy every moment, and most of all, take advantage of every opportunity He gives us. I can't wait to dive into today's episode. I hope it speaks to you, I hope it encourages you, and I hope you'll join us next week. So with that being said, let's jump in and let's start with today. Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Start With Today podcast. I'm so excited you joined me for the 4th episode and the 1-month anniversary of the podcast. I'm super excited for today. As I mentioned last week, I'm going to be sharing my testimony today, and for those of you who may not know what that means, it's the story of what God's brought me through, how I came to know God, and the things I feel He's called me to do now, given the lessons I've learned through Him and the things He's helped me get through. This story is one that very few people know. This isn't something I've gone public with. There's probably, I could count on my 2 hands how many people know the full story that I'm about to share with you. After a lot of prayer and talking to people who I know would be honest with me and people whose opinions I value a lot, I think now's the perfect time to use this story publicly to make a difference in somebody's life. And again, if I'm reaching one person with this, then I'm doing my job and I'm doing what God's called me to do. But also, I think this is a story that is going to give you guys who know me a new perspective on me, as well as those of you who don't know me who listen to the podcast. You're going to get to know me really well from this episode. So the story starts, in my opinion, the story really starts when I was in high school, but I want to give a few details about things that had happened prior to that. So obviously born and raised in the Christian church. I was baptized as a baby, and I was in church my entire life. My parents were divorced in 2008, but even at that point, I was still in church every weekend for the most part. It wasn't really until high school that I was given the option to not go if I didn't want to. Which I obviously chose not to go, but it was a part of my life, and I've known about God my entire life. But the important thing to note here is that up until, and we'll get into it, but up until my freshman year of college, I knew God and God knew me, but that was about it. I never pursued a relationship with God. I never really cared, and that sounds terrible, but that's the truth. So again, I knew about God my whole life, but I consider high school the beginning of my journey with Him, and even then it doesn't start right away, but that's where things really start to get rolling. So in high school, I attended FCA, here and there. One of my really good friends was a leader, and I attended here and there just to kind of check it out. And honestly, it just kind of made me feel good, like, oh, I'm doing something, quote unquote religious this week, so I'm good. And so honestly, I just went to not feel guilty, and that sounds bad, but it's the truth. I went to Young Life a couple times, and there was no problems with it. I just didn't take it seriously. I wasn't going for the right reasons. I really wasn't going hungry for God. I was going because I felt like I should, because it was the right thing to do. It was something almost like a to-do list item. I felt like I had to, in order to, be a good person that week, or, make God happy that week. And obviously I know now that's not how it works, but that's how a lot of people think a Christian life looks like in a relationship with God is, oh, you have to do this, this, and this. And that's just not true at all. But at the time I didn't know that. And so attended FCA and Young Life. And then the summer before my senior year, I entered a relationship that would go on to last about 2 years. But that's definitely a key part of the story, because you'll see later on how that kind of comes full circle and really, let's just say it really ignites my flame. So senior year, I was accepted into Florida Gulf Coast University in Fort Myers, Florida. I was really excited. I was pumped about going out of state. It was a beautiful, beautiful campus, and I was fortunate enough that I was going to be on a full ride academic scholarship. And so I was really excited. After I'd gotten in and accepted, a month or two went by, and I just last minute kind of was like, I kind of want to go look at Ohio State. And a lot of the reasoning for that was I wanted to be closer to my family. I wanted to be closer to my girlfriend at the time. And truly, I felt like OSU would challenge me more. I feel like there's a lot more opportunity as far as careers in the Columbus area compared to Fort Myers. So those were some things that really played a role in me wanting to go look at OSU. And so obviously I went toured, got in, and chose to go to Ohio State. It's important though here, when it came down to me for deciding whether I wanted to do Florida Gulf Coast or Ohio State, it was the first time that I've legitimately prayed hard for something. Like prayed really hard. And it was at the point where I was like, God, please show me signs. Like, I don't know what to do. And this seems so silly, but for the next week or two, everywhere I went, I saw Ohio State shirts, Ohio State license plate covers, just things that I really hadn't noticed before. And again, that could have just been me noticing it because, I was, I guess, thinking about Ohio State, but also I truly do think it was a God thing because of what's happened since I've decided to go there. But it's just important there to note that that's the first time I really was praying for something, and I guess like believing that God could do something about it. And I was right, which even then I didn't understand, but now I look back and realize that was a God thing. Another big turning point or milestone, I guess, in this whole story is as the months went on after I decided to go to Ohio State, I was looking for a roommate on Facebook, and that's when I met my roommate, Isaac. I think it was like a Wednesday or Thursday night, like 12 or 1 in the morning. We randomly found each other on Facebook and messaged and ended up rooming together. And as you'll see later on in this story, and I've talked about a few times, Isaac's a brother to me, and he's been a humongous blessing in my life. And so that, at the time, I was like, oh man, cool, I have a roommate. I had no idea that I was going to be really receiving a brother and somebody that I could count on for the rest of my life. So as senior year continued, and even going into the summer, I really was becoming so absorbed in my relationship that I was unknowingly disregarding my family and my close friends who had always been there for me. It was really tough. I really didn't realize it. And there was a point where I didn't talk to some of my best guy friends for months. And honestly, it may have been close to a year, but they weren't part of my life. I was coming home, from school and then either going to my girlfriend's house or working. And so I really wasn't seeing my family that much. And honestly, it's not even her fault. It was just me. Like I really was enjoying the relationship or like spending time with her, but I kind of forgot about a lot of the other people that were important to me. And I didn't even realize it. So this plays a key part for what's going to happen about a year later. So realizing that, I wasn't being a good friend and I'd kind of shut all those people out, that's something to keep in mind for later on in the story. So anyways, senior year comes to an end, graduation comes and goes, summer was awesome, and next thing you know, off to college. And leaving for college was bittersweet. I obviously too, it's just a huge adjustment, but it wasn't so much like, oh, I'm so sad I'm moving away from home, because I was only 2 hours away. It was just like my relationship. I was going to miss being home all the time with my parents and, my sisters, and it was bittersweet, but I was also just super excited. It was a new chapter of my life, and, I'd busted my butt to get there. And so I was really excited at the same time. So fast forward to college, I'm still in this relationship. Now, she was still in high school at the time. And I feel like as soon as I went to college, this is when things started to go downhill. I don't know if it was, necessarily like we were in different stages of life, if it was because my schedule kind of picked up because of classes, or if it was just the distance. And again, it's only 2 hours, but that can be a huge thing, especially at the age we were at and our relationship at the time. We'd been together for a while. And so I don't really know. I think it was a mix of those things that it just started going downhill. And again, there's no pointing fingers. It was both of us. It takes two people. But that's just something to note, that was kind of the turning point when things started to, I guess, slope downward. Another thing about college, especially the first semester, was being around Isaac really made me curious about pursuing a relationship with God. Isaac was in the Word every day, reading the Bible, doing a devotion. He is a leader for Campus Crusades for Christ, and he was just a really good leader within that group. And I'd attended once or twice and got to see that. But he also, just around like our dorm, he was just always trying to encourage me and push me, and even push me in my faith. And again, I would kind of do it sometimes just to get him off my back. But I was very curious to see somebody that hungry for God. Was really moving. And so that's definitely something I paid attention to. We'd also found a church down there called One Church, which is the place you've heard me mention in the past couple episodes that I've spoken at and been a leader at. But we'd been in and out of One Church. Isaac was definitely there more than I was. I was probably there, I don't know, between like 2 and 4 times first semester. It was cool. Like, I liked it. But again, church just wasn't important to me. And that just stems from my relationship with God not being important to me. Because some people, church just isn't their thing, period. And that's cool. That is what it is. But it was more just because I didn't really care about having a relationship with God. So church just didn't seem like something I needed to do. So fast forward through first semester, and winter break comes along. Winter break of 2018 is one of the hardest times of my life. For those of you who are around me, you know how much I struggled, but it was rough. Even taking these notes and talking about this, it's rough for me to think back because I did a lot of things I wish I wouldn't have done. There were some things that happened that changed my life. It was just a really odd time. It was a really life-changing time. At the time, I thought it was all bad stuff, but looking back, it was one of probably the best times of my life, the best seasons of my life, because there was a lot of change that happened, which really sucked at the time. And looking back now, I realize how much of a God thing it was and how it was necessary for everybody involved to move forward into the things that God has called us to do. So winter break comes around and I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to Christmas. I'm looking forward to spending time with my girlfriend and my family. And then my birthday is on New Year's Day. So I was really excited. Getting ready to turn 19, and it's just always fun. So, we spent the first couple weeks together. I'm home, and then comes what I like to call the week from hell. And I don't say that lightly because at the time it truly was a living hell for me. I remember driving home from my girlfriend's one night, and it was probably, I'm going to guess close to midnight. I don't remember exactly. But I get a call from my sister, and before I moved to college, she never really called me. My sister and I didn't have a great relationship. It wasn't bad. We just didn't talk all the time. And when she called me, I knew something was up. So she calls me and she goes, "Did you talk to Mom?" And I was like, "No, I've been gone all day and all evening." And she goes, "Well, Mom's moving to Florida." I've never felt so shocked. I've never felt so angry and confused at the same time. I also thought my sister was messing with me, which honestly made me more angry because that was something that to me just wasn't funny if it was a joke. My mom is somebody who, like I've talked about many, many times, I'm very close to. She's incredible. And so even thinking about the idea of her moving to Florida, and especially after I chose Ohio State to be closer and turned down a scholarship at a school in Fort Myers, Florida, where they were going to move, I was sick to my stomach. That night, obviously full of a range of emotions, I made a mistake. I made a mistake that would ultimately lead to the end of my relationship. I felt so empty and I felt so angry. And at the time, the relationship was really just going downhill. I think we knew it was going to end at some point soon. And I did something that I still to this day feel guilty about, that led to the end of my relationship. Now, I'm not saying these things to make an excuse for myself, but just to give you some insight to where I was mentally and spiritually. I still didn't know God at this point. So I instantly, my go-to was turn to sin, turn to the ways of this world, be full of anger and confusion and anxiety. And then obviously turning to sin to deal with this because I didn't have God in my life. So anyways, that happens. My relationship ends and I'm single, and it was really rough. I've just never felt so guilty. I've never felt so alone. it was really rough. Obviously, knowing too that my mom was going to be moving is in the back of my mind during all this, and it was really rough. So Christmas comes and goes, and then the day after Christmas, I had to get my wisdom teeth out. So just to recap, my relationship of 2 years ends because of something stupid that I did. I found out my mom's moving 1,000 miles away, and then had to get my wisdom teeth out. So this was within about a week, a little less than a week at this point. Come back, get my wisdom teeth out. Everything went well, praise God. Just chilling at home. December 29th, 2018 was the day that my mom left. I remember everything. And I talked about this last week. One of the memories that I will remember every detail of for the rest of my life was the day she left. I remember what I was wearing. I remember what was on the counter. And thank God, Isaac drove up from Chillicothe, Ohio, which is 3 hours from where I live. He drove up to be with me because he knew how upset I was, and he didn't want me to be alone for my birthday, which that's another thing. My mom was going to be gone for my birthday, and I was really upset about that. And that's such a dumb thing to be upset about, but I was hurting. And so he drove up to be with me, but I'll just never forget the day they left. It was heartbreaking. It was sad. I just remember hugging my mom and telling her goodbye, and we both just broke down. And that has a lot to do with the things we'd gone through together over the years. And two, it's just like a new chapter for her. And I didn't understand still why they were going, and I guess I should have said this before. Her and my stepdad felt like God had put on their heart to pick up and move to Florida to do some mission work, to hopefully plant a church. And, my mom said to me, she goes, Jeff, I know you don't understand this right now, but I promise you will. And I didn't get it. I thought she was lying. I thought she was making an excuse for why she was moving to Florida. I really didn't get it. They had a job lined up down there. They were going to be caretakers for some special needs adults, some high functioning special needs adults who honestly I consider extended family now. I love spending time with them. So they had a job, and my mom's always been, like I said, a very selfless person. So she was getting to do something she loved. And at the end of the day, that was the one thing I think that was giving me comfort, as well as the fact that my stepdad would be there. I love my stepdad. And I knew she was going to be with somebody who cared and who loved her and was going to take care of her. So that was the only thing that I really was able to have comfort with that situation. So they moved the 29th, and then New Year's Eve, the 31st, was a family friend of ours was having a New Year's Eve celebration, and they invited Isaac and I over, and they kind of made it my birthday celebration too, just because they knew how much I was hurting. And I think it's important to mention at this point in the story, I had not had a sip of alcohol my junior and senior year of high school. Had not had a sip of alcohol first semester of college. New Year's Eve of 2018, I passed out. I shouldn't even say I blacked out in the front yard of these people's house because I drank so much, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I was just so upset. I was so empty. I was so just full of guilt that I was like, well, this will take it away. And I had to get carried out of the house by Isaac and back into my bed in my house. And it was something I'll never forget. It was at that point, for the first time in my life, I felt like I didn't have control of anything. It was the first time in my life that I was so, when I say empty, just total, like nothing. I felt completely alone. I just didn't feel a thing. And I didn't want to. Like, I was just so done at that point because I'd lost so much in such a short period of time. And I'd made so many mistakes in that period of time. It was terrible. There will never be a more painful time in my life. And I'm very blessed that Isaac was there to make sure I was okay, because if he wasn't there, I really don't know what would happen over that week or so. So, like I said, at that point, I just was very alone. I felt depressed. Most of all, I felt guilty, not only for what I'd done in my relationship, but for the alcohol, like the drinking. That really bothered me because I'd gone so long. It felt feeling like an outcast in high school because I wasn't the kid that wanted the party. I wasn't the kid that wanted to drink. And my friends never pushed me to do that, but I just still was like, man, like, they're having fun. So, but I just still, it was tough for me to say no, but I knew at that point in my life it was the right thing. And so kind of breaking that not rule, but breaking that boundary I'd set for myself, I just felt guilty. So winter break comes and goes, and we go back to school. And for the next 2.5 months, I turned to going out every weekend. I turned to trying to find a relationship to be in, to seek fulfillment, because I felt so empty. I mean, when I say I was using alcohol to cope, again, I didn't realize this till after the fact, but I was really using that going out, thinking it was going to distract me and take away all my pain. And that wasn't the case. And so it was about a week before spring break, and I just remember laying in bed in my dorm realizing I gotta do something. I gotta stop. I can't depend on drinking. I can't depend on the party scene to fix my situation. There's no chance I'm gonna get through this by myself. And that was really when I finally was like, you know what? I gotta let God in, because I can't do this. I can't fix this. I had no motivation to do anything. My grades were terrible. I had the lowest GPA I'd ever had in my academic career. And it was at the point where I just was at my rock bottom. And a lot of people don't know that. I was very good at playing it off. I was very good about telling everybody everything was fine. I was at my rock bottom. And it took me this long to finally go public and say that, because it was embarrassing for so long and I felt so shameful. And when I finally let God in and finally said, you know what, God, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, that's when my life slowly began to change. And that's when I began to change. And it wasn't just me, my flesh, it was my heart. When I finally gave my heart to him and was willing to listen to God and live for him, everything started to change. So we went on spring break, and actually Isaac and I went and stayed with my mom and Michael in Florida, which I was super excited about. I hadn't seen her in probably a month and a half, because I think they had come back once between the time they moved and spring break, but I hadn't seen her in a while, and we got to meet all the residents that they take care of, and it was awesome. It was an awesome experience, and one of the best trips of my life. And the last day of that trip, before we went to the airport to fly back to Columbus, I got baptized in the Gulf of Mexico. I have pictures, and at this point you'll see them. I'm going to put them up on the Facebook and on my Instagram, and they're not even the best pictures. I look completely out of shape. I'm not looking great, but they're definitely pictures that will stick with me for a long time. I'll never forget, those moments. Isaac was there. It was beautiful. And that's really when I just truly, obviously in my heart, had decided to give my life to God. But in that moment, it was a visual and physical representation of the inward change that I'd already made. And it was beautiful. And it was something I'll remember for the rest of my life. We get back from spring break. And at this point, I will say it wasn't like everything changed instantly. I wasn't drinking, but I was still seeking my fulfillment in people. And at this point, I think I was talking to a girl, and it wasn't bad. Like, I actually did like her, and we hung out and enjoyed spending time together, but it was also just people. Like, even my guy friends, who at this point, thank God, were willing to be friends and let me repair some of the damage I'd done. But I was like always making sure they thought I was doing cool stuff, or I don't know. I was still embarrassed to almost say like I'd given my life to God. But it was still better than it had been, but it wasn't a change that just happened right away. And I think, again, that's the misconception, is people think that the Christian life is so happy-go-lucky and everything's great. And it's not true, because you still have to do work. Like, you still have to be willing to let God change you. And that involves you making decisions, maybe taking some people out of your life and doing some things that they might not agree with, or just doing things you're not comfortable with. And so that was something I had to battle with for a really long time. One of those things for me was getting in a routine of going to church consistently again. One, because I just felt guilty. Like, if I step foot in there, it's going to set on fire. And that sounds silly, but that's how I felt. But we started going to one church consistently. And one church was the first church that I have willingly gone back to without my mom telling me to go, without my dad telling me to go. I wanted to go. And little did I know that one church was going to become such a huge part of my life, and still is to this day, even while I'm home. One church has been incredible, and I love everybody that's a part of that team and a part of the church family down there. It's just crazy, again, how I was scared to go back, and then when I did, it changed my life, and I met some of the greatest people that are in my life. So we started going back consistently and finished off the semester. Moved back home in the summer, and I still lived at my mom's house in Ohio. She was gone, obviously, so I lived by myself all summer, and it was actually kind of fun. I was able to have friends over, and I built a fire pit in the backyard, and I actually had a really good summer. But most of all, it was the most transformative period of my life in my faith. I experienced Jesus like I never had before. I spent every day in the Word, reading the Bible, hungry for what God was going to say to me that day, and it was one of the best summers of my life, and it truly did change my life. And part of that was I started going to this thing called the U at Faith Family Church in North Canton, and it's pretty much a college service, but just college kids. And it really just, I felt, it was like, I remember it was the first time I put my hands up in worship somewhere, and it was the first time I just felt like I could express my faith in public. And it was a really cool community that changed the way I looked at the idea of Christian community. And so that's kind of where I felt God start to call me to use my story, use my pain, use the things that He'd brought me through, because I want to make it very clear, I did not get through this stuff alone. If it wasn't for God, I truly do not know how long it would have taken me, and I don't know where I'd be in my life at this point. But I felt Him finally say, okay, it's time to use that. And most of all, use it to help people come to know Him. And so, long story short, that's where I reached out to one church, and next thing you know, I was leading or speaking in youth in the young adult group down there. And now that I'm home and not obviously at one church, mostly because of COVID, I'm not able to go down, and they're not doing services right now. But obviously I live in Canton as well, so it's not like I'm able to go to one church every weekend currently. And then obviously the podcast now, that's kind of when I got home and I said I wanted to still maintain that, ministry kind of passion that I'd developed at one church leading. That's where this podcast came about. And it's only because I now feel like I have a responsibility to use the things that God's brought me through, my experiences, my pain, the people who saved my life, and not in I want to make it clear, I was never suicidal. But I was just in a very dark place. And there are a lot of people who spoke into me, and there's some who have no idea how big of an impact some of the things they said to me had. But it was, realizing that I could use those people, the stories that we'd shared, as well as just like the things God spoke to me, and speak that into other people through this platform. And that's what this podcast is all about. I know this is a long episode, and I honestly was trying to keep it as short as possible. But this story, it's really important, I think, for people to understand why I'm so passionate about what I do about this. And again, this podcast isn't reaching thousands of people, and that's not what this is about to me. I just want to share this story. I want to share the goodness of God and the grace of God and the way He showed up in my life when nobody else would, and picked me up, gave me a hug, and said, all right, let's start walking. And it's just crazy how much my life has changed. And I look back now on that day my mom left, and it was the end of a huge chapter of my life, but it was the start of the rest of my life. And I'm so thankful that, even though it was painful, every mistake I made led me to letting God into my life. And God didn't make me make those mistakes and do the things I did. But He didn't also, force them from not happening. I made the choices I made. But I also made the choice to finally say, you know what, God, I can't do this by myself. And He took me from a arrogant, hypocritical kid who was living like the rest of the world wanted him to, turning to sin, turning to alcohol. And He turned me into a joyful and humble man of God, living for Him. And if you get anything from my 30-minute rant today, I want you to know, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, that He can do the same thing for you, no matter where you are in life, no matter what mistakes you've made, no matter what you're shameful about. He literally just wants you to say yes, and I promise you that's the greatest decision you'll ever make in your life. So I just really encourage you to think about some of the things you've heard today. Obviously, if you have any questions at all, reach out, contact me. I'd be more than happy to answer questions or talk about certain parts of the story again. But I always end the episode talking about starting with today. And I just want to encourage each and every one of you that as you start each and every day, think about whether you have a great relationship with God or not. Think about the things in life that you've gone from feeling terrible to getting through, learning something from, and getting better. And those are the experiences that God wants you to remember that are going to help you have more faith in him. So I can't wait to talk to you next week. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this story inspired you. I know I sound confident sharing it, but it's been very nerve-wracking. I've tried to record this like 3 times, and it's just tough. I get emotional because it was like I said, I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm not proud of the things I've done, but it's part of my story. And I truly believe that if God can take me from where I was to where I am now, he can do that with anybody, and he wants to do it with everybody. So I hope you have a great rest of your week. Can't wait to talk to you next Monday for episode 5. And just remember that you can't control what's going to happen tomorrow. You can't change the things you've done yesterday. So just start with today. Talk to you guys next week.